Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang Dhammang Sanghang Namasami. So I'd like to offer my greetings and welcome everyone this evening. Um, so, through the course of my Dhamma talks, and especially lately with having just finished teaching an Introduction to Meditation course, I speak a lot about meditation, and I speak about a lot about different meditation objects. And we've taught several different ones, and in the course of talks we'll be talking about, for this meditate, if you've got this kind of problem, maybe try this meditation. Or if you've got, this type of personality, you might want to try this meditation object. And one of the things is I'm quite often making reference to the 40 meditation objects, or the 40 kammaṭṭhanas. And the other day I was chatting with a layman, and he brought up that I make reference to these a lot, but I've never actually explained what the 40 meditation objects are. So tonight I thought I'd speak a bit more about these. They're called the 40 kammaṭṭhanas, or the 40 meditation objects. So these, in this list, this grouping of 40, as far as I understand, they only appear in the commentaries. Starts with like the Visuddhimagga, which is this commentarial work which came hundreds of years after the Buddha, but it's quite a guide to practice and a guide to meditation. And but in the suttas themselves, the Buddha didn't say, okay, here are the 40 meditation objects. So that's really good to keep in mind, because the Buddha was quite often, saying, here are the, 10 of these, or here are the 15 of these, or, here are the 37 of these. So he does quite often give the list of these different things, but he never put all the meditation objects together in one list. So that's good to remember. So sometimes, a lot of times, we talk about it, and we just in the way we talk about it, it kind of sounds like, and we're referring to it as being like the comprehensive list of meditation objects. So if you're doing something and it's not on this list, you're doing something wrong. And that's not how it is, because there are different, methods of meditation that don't fit on the list. Or, you'd have to kind of use some justification and some kind of loose justification to try to get them onto the list. So, for example, Lumpur Sumedho, meditation object that he uses and he teaches all the time is the sound of silence. And the sound of silence is not on the list. Or in the Thai forest tradition, um, the traditional way that uh, taught from Lumpur Mun and the old generation is to do the mental recitation of the word Buddho. So a lot of times we'll use Buddho along with the breath, but um, there is a way of just using Buddho as just recollecting Buddho, 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 just the word in your mind, and it would fall under recollection of the Buddha, but it also sometimes is just used as just a straight mantra. So you could say it's on the list, but you can also say it's not quite on the list. So it's really so if there is something, which isn't on the list, isn't in these 40 kammaṭṭhanas, it's good to remember it doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong. So in the course of meditation and with meditation objects in Theravada Buddhism, generally, they'll be split into two categories. The ones for developing samadhi or concentration, so the concentration, tranquility, these objects. And then you'll have another set which are used for developing wisdom. So sometimes you'll hear from certain schools of Theravada Buddhism, they'll refer to them as samatha and vipassana. But as far as I understand, the word vipassana actually isn't used very often in the suttas. And so if you use samatha vipassana, that's okay. It's the same understanding. Or if you want to use concentration and wisdom or samadhi and panya, it's okay. You'll see these different schools will just use different words to be describing the same thing. So there are these different types. But then again, doing something like one of these wisdom meditation objects, these can also help, develop samadhi as well, develop our concentration, our tranquility as well. So when we get into, these 40 kammaṭṭhānas or these 40 meditation objects, they're again split up into different categories and not necessarily the categories of uh, samadhi, panya, or samatha and vipassana. They're broken up into the similar types of meditation they are. So you have the 10 kasinas, the 10 asubha kammaṭṭhānas. So these are contemplations of the unattractiveness of the body, the 10 anusati, the 10 reflections, the 4 Brahma Vihara, the 4 Arupa jhanas, the contemplation of food, and the contemplation of the 4 elements. So, so it's a whole lot, eh? But so we start off with the 10 kasina meditations. So even if I remember right, in the Visuddhimagga, when they start talking about meditation, they start with these objects, these 10 kasina objects. So kasina objects are this is a very like visual way of meditating. So these involve usually for most of them, it's staring at like a disc, different colored discs or different discs made of things. Not all of them have discs, but but even though the Visuddhimagga starts on this, in the Thai forest tradition, we um, it's very discouraged to do kasina meditation. It's not something we start with. It's not something which is encouraged very much at all. I remember one time Lumpur Pasano was saying that he can only remember one time he ever heard Lumpur Cha teaching kasina meditation. And he was teaching it to one particular monk because, he felt that this is what this monk really needed. This particular monk was having a lot of difficulties with certain things. So Lumpur Cha had taught him this. But generally in the Thai forest tradition, we go away from this. And I remember once when I was right around the time I ordained as a monk, Ajahn Nando gave this question and answer. It was at Wat Nanachat. It was just for the monks, and he was talking all about meditation. And he was and when he was asked about this, the kasinas, why we don't teach them or emphasize them in the Thai forest tradition, and he gave this really great explanation. And one of the main reasons is um, they're very visual. So part of the meditation is, staring at these discs and then purposely bringing up this um, these images in the mind's eye. So with these, sometimes people can start can lead to some delusions, can lead to some, very, very visual. It's not it's we don't view it as good or something we should be going after when we start meditating. But that being said, some people do develop these and it can work with them. So it's not saying don't ever do these, but in the Thai forest tradition, these kasina meditations are one we kind of move away from and don't encourage. But then the next set is the Tenasuba uh, meditations or the Tenasuba contemplations. So this word asuba, quite often it's translated as sometimes as unattractive or repulsive or loathsome. Some of the translations sound pretty dark or pretty unappealing. But but the word itself, suba means beautiful, and then adding that a before it, asuba means unbeautiful. So it can be contemplating the unbeautiful parts of the body. So with these, a lot of these are around contemplating a dead body, a corpse. And so it's contemplating these corpses in these different states after death and during the decomposition process. And again, a lot of times, you're coming, especially coming new to Buddhism, and that sounds really, really morbid, really, really dark, like, but part of the reasons we contemplate the body like this, and what happens to the body, after death. We do this because we're looking at, one, the not beautiful aspects of the body, because again, we view bodies as beautiful. We have a lot of greed, a lot of lust around bodies of ourselves and other bodies as well. And when we're looking at them as they actually are, in accordance with nature and what they do, that can really reduce the lust, the greed that we have for our bodies and for making them look perfect or being attracted to other ones. But it's also breaking down this sense of self, the sense of attachment we have to our bodies. So when we're looking at the body and what happens to it after death, and as the body breaks apart, into its different pieces, or it's broken up and scattered, and so, or it's just weather worn down to being bones. So when we do this, we're really seeing that, this body isn't us. It's not self. It's a vehicle. It's something we're using for right now, but it's really part of nature and it returns to nature. And so even though it can come off sounding kind of dark, when you really take this up, and if you take it up properly, it's the opposite. It's very light. Feels very freeing. But that being said, for some people, doing a lot of body contemplation, depending on their character type or kind of where they're at a particular point, if it can lead to kind of some negative mind states. So one thing for not everyone, but a certain group of people, they'll find that if they start contemplating the body, that maybe the next day or a couple of days later, they'll find that they're in a pretty foul mood. Either they're really grumpy or they're kind of depressed or whatever. And so it's important if you're falling under this, and this is happening to you, then stop doing it, or reduce it. Focus more on stuff like the Brahma Viharas, like loving kindness, compassion, or just samadhi, just developing with the breath meditation. So the ten different asubas are um, seeing the corpse as like bloated. So when it's decomposing, it bloats up. Um, Another one is seeing it as, when it's just getting discolored and patching, seeing it as like when it's festering and pussing, can be seeing it cut up into pieces. I actually knew some Sri Lankan monks. This was, almost 20 years ago. And they were telling us that they had this one friend, this monk, and he was just suffering so bad with lust. And it was just miserable being a monk because he was just suffering so bad with this. But then he started contemplating the body being cut up, and a body which was cut up, and it just cut that lust right out. And he said, "Oh, the being a monk is so happy now. He feels so much better because that mind state, that kilesa, that defilement was really cut down and reduced by doing this. Um, can be not more of them can be corpses bleeding, a corpse when it's worm infested, or even when it's just down to just being a skeleton, and the wind and the elements have worked it down to just a skeleton. So again, these are the ones that especially people new to Buddhism find really really shocking that monks contemplate stuff like this. But one of the things with Luang Por Chah in his tradition is in the main sala, the main meditation hall at Wat Pah Pong at his monastery. He actually, in a case there's a skeleton, like a real human skeleton in the case there, because he wanted to have this in all of his monasteries, all of his branch monasteries, to have a skeleton meditation hall for monks and lay people to use as a tool to contemplate. And and even at Wat Pananachat, where I ordained, there's one in the hall there, and it's um, most people know the relatives of the person, so the story about how the skeleton got there is quite well known in the monastery because it wasn't that long ago, maybe about 50 years ago. Um, so the next set of meditation objects in this 40 are what are called the anusatis, or these are like the recollections or the contemplations. And so, you have the contemplation of the Buddha, you have the contemplation of the Dhamma, contemplation of the Sangha. So, these three, it's called like the three jewels of Buddhism, the triple gem, the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha. So this the Buddha is like you can recollect the qualities of the Buddha. And when we do our morning and evening chanting, we actually part of our chant, we do these sections on the recollection of the qualities of the Buddha and the enlightened mind, the Buddha himself, the we contemplate the Dhamma, and we go through and we chant the different qualities of the Dhamma. And these are really great for contemplating. So it's one of these nice things when we do these chants, even though you're chanting it and you might think it sounds devotional, it's actually really like it's instructions which can help us with if we want to take up these contemplation, these reflections. And then we also do the contemplation of the Sangha. We can also recollect sila, or our virtue, our behavior, sila, our behavior by body and speech. I remember we used to have this one senior monk, and during Patimokkha, so Patimokkha is every 2 weeks, the monks get together and one of the monks gets up and recites the rules. So our 227 rules. And and it takes a long time. And in the Thai tradition is we have to memorize the rules. So whoever is chanting it has to chant it from memory in Pali, and you have another monk reading along, following it, making sure you don't make any mistakes. And if you make any mistakes, they call you out on it, and you've got to start at that point again and get it right. And so, and it gets down to very particulars about pronunciation and stuff too. And so, when we would chant the Patimokkha, this very senior monk would be sitting there meditating, and he'd have this big smile on his face. And I remember asking, I was very new at the time. I remember asking one of the more senior monks, "Oh, what is Ajahn meditating on? He's got this big smile." And this monk's like, "Well, I've asked him before, and he's actually doing Sila Anusati, like he's recollecting, listening to the rules, listening to the Sila of monks. He's recollecting that, remembering, and bringing to mind, okay, I've kept these rules. I haven't broken these rules in this last 2 weeks, so we can do, Sila Anusati, and then we can. Another one is uh, Chaga Anusati, so recollection of giving, or sometimes they'll call it Dana Anusati, so recollection of your generosity of giving. And this is one that Lumpur Biak would recommend. When I lived at Wat Phakram, I remember him giving Dhamma talks and recommending this to the lay people. He was saying, if you're trying to meditate and you can't make the mind peaceful, try recollecting and remembering these times you've practiced dana, these times you've practiced generosity, where you've given to other people, you've given to the monks, or you've given food to people, and this can help calm the mind down, help brighten the mind. And the next one we have contemplation of devas, so contemplation of heavenly beings. We have then there's mindfulness of death, so contemplation of death. Um, and before we were contemplating like the corpse ones were more about the corpse like after death, but this you can actually contemplate about death itself. Again, it sounds dark, but when it's done properly, again, it makes you feel very light, very happy, very open. Um, there's mindfulness of the body, so kaya anusati. So this can be like when we contemplate the 32 parts of the body. So looking at the body as the different parts that make it up. So actually in the ordination ceremony, when you ordain as a monk or a novice, actually as part of the ceremony, you're given a meditation object. And it's actually the first five of these parts of the body. So it's hair of the head, hair of the bodies, nails, teeth, and skin. And you're given these in forward order and reverse order. So so again, it's interesting that as part of the ordination ceremony, we this is what we're given because when you're contemplating the body, again, you're seeing it as not self because we see all these different parts, we put it together, and we see this as me and mine. But when you take them apart, these different parts of the body, you see, well, which one is me, which one is mine? So it's very similar to like a car. Like you look at a car and you see a car as one thing. But then if you were to take it apart and spread all the parts out on, like a warehouse floor or out in a field, which part is the cart? It really changes your perception on that. And again, this is another one that can really reduce, greed and lust as well, and reduce the attachment to the body. Um, then we have mindfulness of breathing, which we've talked about a lot before. So that one is the one that we, hear about the most when we start talking about meditation. And then we have contemplation, and sometimes they write it as calmness or as nibbana. Um, and then we move on to the four Brahma Viharas. So these are these four divine abidings, these mind states, these really like bright, wholesome, like heavenly mind states. So this is loving kindness or metta. This is karuna or compassion. This is mudita, which we don't quite have an English word for, but sometimes it's sympathetic joy. This is us getting happiness for the successes of other people. And then the last one is upekkha or equanimity. So again, we talk about these ones quite a bit, and these ones are really great and are really helpful dealing with stuff like anger or feeling depressed, or just really great ways to make the mind calm, to make the mind bright, to make the mind happy, and to really deal with, difficult emotions you have towards other people. Like if you have animosity or you're irritated with someone, these Brahmi Viharas are really great for that. And then the next four is the Arupa jhanas. So we don't really have to talk about these so much. These are very high. So when you're practicing meditation, when your mind really concentrates and becomes like one pointed, and it really enters those states of like deep concentration, of deep samadhi, these states are known as the jhanas. And there's four jhanas and these four absorptions. And um, they get deeper and deeper. So these are called, the first four jhanas are called like the rupa jhanas or the form jhanas. And and again, these are considered like very difficult to get to. These are very deep states of absorption. And then after those ones, there's another four, even deeper, which are called the arupa jhanas. And we don't really have to get into them because again, they're really really deep. We just need to work on getting these first four. But and then the next meditation object is the contemplation of food. So, again, for monks or for anyone, really we can really contemplate our food and contemplate, it's made of elements, it's and it's going to become part of this body. And you can look at it and you're like, well, what's the difference between this and between me? And looking at that and contemplating your food. And monks, we're supposed to do it every time before we eat. And so you'll see in in the monastery before the meal, different monasteries do it differently. But a lot of the ones I've stayed at, like right before the monks eat, we're all sitting on the floor in a row and we've all got our bowls in front of us with our food because all of our food will be in one bowl. And it'll be like a long period of silence where, all the monks are looking into their bowls and contemplating the food and working on that. And then the last one is the contemplation of the four elements. So this is um, earth, water, fire, and air. But it's not quite like there's not actual like earth, like dirt in us, and looking at it within ourselves, within our own bodies, but it's like the solids, the liquids, the heat, the digestion of the body, the movement in the body. So this is just kind of a brief of the 40 Kammaṭṭhānas, the 40 different meditation objects. So it's also really important to emphasize you don't have to learn all of these, and you don't have to practice all of these, and you don't have to master all of these. So a lot of times we'll just they'll most monks will, or most people meditating will have one main meditation object they do, and usually a few other ones to support that main one. But with picking which meditation object you think is best for you, um, um, there's some of the texts get into, the different personality types you have, and certain meditation objects might work better for certain personality types. So someone, if their personality type is more of a greed character, they might do more of like the asubha or the body contemplation. But but with these, it's actually the really important thing is to just try different ones. You know, um, we all have all these different um, kilesas, all these different defilements, greed, hatred, delusion. We all have these, and we all have our own characters. So to really find out which one works for us, the best thing to do is just try out different ones and see what works and what doesn't work. And and then also be aware that different times in your practice, you might focus on different ones. So if you're going through maybe a particularly difficult time, maybe you've got a lot of anger coming up, a lot of maybe, dark, more down mind states, you might be like, yeah, right now, or more, maybe more difficulties with people in your life. You might be like, okay, right now, I really need some metta. I really need some Brahma Viharas, or I really need to be practicing some equanimity. Or other times, you might be, say, having a lot of greed for food coming up, and be like, okay, I need to work us more on contemplating the food. And so it's one of those things that it will be a little more flexible for how we contemplate in our practice. So I'd like to offer this to everyone as a bit of a reflection for this evening.